Unhealed wounds often show up as control instead of clarity. First of all, society, not me, not you, but maybe the greater us, right? Society has called men in particular to be leaders, to be providers, and to be protectors. I'm not really here today to argue for or against that. Is that right or wrong? I'm not really one for a lot of black and white thinking, but I'm just setting up the idea that that is sort of how we have lifted up men to be in leadership roles in general. Healing is not a finish line. Once you're healed, then you can lead. That's sort of the mantra that people walk around with. Welcome back to another episode of the Heal to Lead podcast. I am your host, Kevin Overton-Hadnot, and this is going to be a great episode. So go ahead and lock in right now. Matter of fact, if you have not subscribed, go ahead and subscribe, like, and share this YouTube channel, this video. It's going to be a great one, and more episodes are on the way. This is a solo episode. You get me, my tea, and my dog. We're here. We're ready to invite you into our space today. Um, my core theme as I'm starting out right now is really going to be around leadership does not require perfection. It does not require perfection. It really requires awareness, it requires humility, and it requires responsibility for your healing. That's how I'm coming out today. I'm coming out hard and swinging. It requires responsibility for your healing. Again, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. But before I jump in this episode, I wanted to shout out my guy, Dr. Robert Britton. This episode, we're going to make it sponsored by him. He is with RSG, his organization. He's obviously the author, not only PhD, but he's a 5-time author. His latest book is Find Your Happy. And listen, we are wearing swag from the RSG studios. Shout out to him for making this. Go to therapy, y'all. Go to therapy. Shout out to this merch that he got for me. He gifted this for me either for Christmas or my birthday. Obviously, they both were close together, so we'll just go with my birthday since we celebrated my birthday on my last episode. But shout out to Robert Britton. He may be back on the episode, so stay tuned for him coming to the studios. But let me just set the frame some more for our episode today. The first thing is like some of us were taught that healing was a finish line. Healing is not a finish line. Once you're healed, then you can lead. That's sort of the mantra that people walk around with. But real life does not work like that. Real life does not work like that. So I'm just going to introduce this tension that we're going to be wrestling with throughout this conversation today. Many people delay leadership. They delay purpose. They delay influence because they feel that they are too broken. And others lead from the opposite perspective, which is they lead without awareness of their wounds. And that, for me, causes harm for them and even more harm for others around them. So I'm thinking today is really just how can we reframe this idea and really reframe it to say healing is not necessarily a prerequisite for leadership. It's really our unexamined wounds are. Before I keep going, let me just tell a story. I was sitting at home watching a TV show. Just imagine me on my nice, comfortable loft. I just furnished it. I'm excited about it. I hadn't really got to spend a lot of time up there drinking tea, eating popcorn, and I came up upon this show that Tiffany Haddish did, and she really obviously she's an actress and comedian, and she didn't really recreate the girls trip show that she did, but she did something a little bit differently where she took her real friends to Africa. They went all over Africa, but this one particular episode, I believe it was in Ghana, and in this episode, it was called "Lonely at the Top," and part of the conversation it went many different directions. Of course, it showed food and culture and just the whole experience of all of the women who were on that trip. But part of the episode was she was marrying herself. Listen, I don't know how you feel about that, if you agree or disagree. But part of what she wanted to do is love herself more, do better for herself, show more self compassion, and she really wanted to learn more about the women traditional ways of women go through before marriage. And so it talks and walks through like different, almost like a panel of women sat down and just kind of showed her the ropes. She did some other different like traditional healings with her friends. But one of the things, and the reason why I was called Lonely at the top, is she mentioned a little bit about how being Tiffany Haddish and her position and her status, of course, it's related to like dating and relationships, but ultimately she was just saying it's lonely at the top. And I thought about that as I was sitting in my loft, eating like the best popcorn on earth. I won't say the name, but I brought this up because a lot of this also happens in leadership as well. In that being a man can also sometimes be isolating or lonely. Oftentimes we retreat inwardly, or just how we have to perform, and maybe how our environments are formed and our expectations around us. It can get lonely inside of our existence and being. And I just wanted to hold space for just that this is what this episode and this podcast is for, is to invite you into to our space and to know that you don't have to be alone in who you are and who you're trying to be, and just yourself. So, as you can tell, this episode is very much around healing and leadership. And I'm actually have been blending for a while all of those, both of those words and ideas into my work. I've been so passionate, and that's why the podcast is called Healed to Lead. And I wanted to share more about the work itself, Healed to Lead, and just make it more personal, and in the heartbeat behind why Healed to Lead exists. So as I just sort of slow down and welcome you all into this space and make it more personal, let me tell you more about why this work exists. First of all, society, not me, not you, but maybe the greater us, right? Society has called men in particular to be leaders, to be providers, and to be protectors. I'm not really here today to argue for or against that. Is that right or wrong? I'm not really one for a lot of black and white thinking, but I'm just setting up the idea that that is sort of how we have lifted up men to be in leadership roles in general, whether that's with families, communities, churches, organizations. Society has called us men to be providers and protectors, and I think if we go back through like the lineage and history of where that sort of come from, I was just reminded that society didn't label men as leaders and protectors and providers all at once. I think it developed over time, maybe thousands of years. Early survival-based roles, remember hunter-gatherer societies. They really gradually hardened into expectations as agriculture, land ownership, maybe even as patriarchy sort of took hold. And I think that sort of position and sustained men as heads of households and ultimately as authority figures. And then, religion and culture sort of later reinforced those roles, as moral obligations, kind of embedding that into like the heart blood of our existence. And then by industrial revolution, our worth as men became closely tied to productivity, income, and emotional restraint. And then even in the modern era, we see gender roles having evolved a bit more, but really the expectation for men to lead, provide, and protect, that still remains. And often, and the reason why I become passionate about this, it still remains, but often without teaching us men how to feel, how to heal, and really how to really know ourselves beyond having to perform. So again, rarely has society taught men how to feel safely, and what I mean by that is like how to experience emotion without shame, how to experience emotion without punishment or without judgment, or even without fear of being seen as weak. Many men we learn earlier on that feelings need to be managed. Obviously, they need to be minimized according to societal expectations, or maybe even hidden in order to be accepted. Again, I'm coming in hard at this because as a society, we have perpetuated this mindset and this way of having to be a man. And again, rarely has society taught men how to even face fear, right? Not by overpowering it or pushing through it, but really by listening to what fear is signaling about limits, about needs, or even unresolved wounds. Maybe instead fear often gets translated into like control, anger, or unresolved wounds. Again, I'm walking through some of the embedment, if you will, of what society has taught us and restricted us to be as men. Rarely has it taught men to sit with uncertainty. That's super important. Um, to Rarely has society taught us how to sit with uncertainty, to not to tolerate not knowing, to tolerate not fixing, not performing uncertainty. And I'm guilty of this as well. I'm just raising my right hand. Uncertainty can feel threatening in a culture that equates masculinity with certainty and confidence. Like you got to know it all. You got to know how to do. You have to have all the answers. I'm watching you. You know, this is the way it needs to be. But that really leave men, and I hope you're with me, feeling anxious and rigid whenever answers aren't immediate. That's when our ego probably kick in. That's when our anxiety kicks in. That's when we feel shameful or embarrassed, right, or judged. And then also rarely has society taught us men how to know who we are apart from performance. How to separate productivity, how to separate provision, how to separate, or even achievement, right? So when worth is measured by output, how much you're able to get done, that's definitely one of the five evils of society that I talked about already on one of the episodes. But identity becomes fragile. And then rest and failure or transition can feel like a loss to us rather than like a loss of self rather than like a normal part of being a human being. Like you're a human, you get to you get to separate those things and not measure yourself by outputs. So, what has been the cost of this? Many men, we've learned how to lead by avoiding wounds. We've learned how to provide by disconnecting ourselves. We've learned how to protect by armoring up and wearing emotional bulletproof vests. We've learned how to survive by choosing our ego over identity. And so I'm just speaking the truth here and reminding us that avoidance and the way we've been operating, avoidance then gets rewarded as strength. Or maybe emotional distance gets mistaken for, okay, this man is mature, right? Or control even gets confused with leadership. No, I think this is more like control than it actually is like leading people or leadership. So again, this is why the Heal to Lead work and my heart has been sort of behind this idea because I really want to. I'm not trying to like dismantle leadership. I'm really helping us and myself redefine it and allowing us to create space where, man, we don't have to choose between power or presence, or we don't have to choose between like authority or being authentic with ourselves or in others, or we don't have to choose between just leadership and healing. Like they both can and should coexist. And again, I say this every episode, but and I think it's clearer to say it again here. Heal to Lead was born because too many men were leading from pressure and not from presence. So this work isn't about making us soft men, sassy men. It's really just about how do we ground ourselves in who we really wanted to become in presence, authenticity, and real healing. This is definitely a good time to insert my journal that I wrote, a 21 day journal called A Man's Guide to Healing and Leadership. Make sure you check that out on Amazon today. So I keep going. That's not even what I want to talk about today. That's just kind of how I wanted to open up this conversation. And if you have questions about that, please email me at healtolead@gmail.com. I would love to talk one on one and just tell you more about the Heal to Lead journey and the reasons why I created it. But what I really want to talk about is attachment wounds and self concept. Now, I don't know what sparked this on, but we're here and we're in it. So let's talk about attachment wounds and self concept. And what do I mean by healing? I think that's important. Like, I want to clarify this. Like, healing is not never being triggered. I'm not saying that we're never not going to be triggered anymore. Once you be healed, there's no, because I think life still happens, right? So healing doesn't mean like the absence of emotional triggers. I do think it means, recognizing triggers without being overtaken by them. There's a big difference, right? Triggers, I'm hopeful that triggers can become signals rather than commands. What I mean by that is like, hey, a trigger comes, I have to act or respond or behave in a certain kind of way. But no, they're just signals that come up. I love data. And this is your opportunity to think of it as more data versus like, okay, a command for me to do something or act a certain kind of way. Healing for me is like increased capacity, it's increased choice, and it's increased self-awareness. Amen to that. Healing shows up as a greater ability to tolerate discomfort. There's a lot of talk on about one or two therapists that I follow on social media who often talks about capacity and being discomfort or experiencing discomfort. And I'm leaning in on that as well too. Like healing shows up as a greater ability to tolerate discomfort. Why? Because our society and the things that we're experiencing in our lives often bring a little bit of that discomfort to us, and we have to be able to understand that. And again, if you're triggered, but not think of it as a command. So healing shows up as a greater ability to tolerate discomfort, but also as a way to pause before reacting, or maybe even choose responses that are aligned with your values rather than survival patterns. I listen. This is a good moment to promote the Let Them Theory by Mel Robbins. I read that and that changed my complete way of looking and thinking and behaving inside of relationships. Um, so check that out for sure. I also define both attachment wounds and self concept before I just start talking at you all. But an attachment wound refers to disruptions or injuries in early relational experiences, particularly with caregivers. And they shape how a person, how you or me, how we learn to experience safety, how we learn how to experience connection, and how we learn how to experience trust and even regulation. But these wounds, though, influence how individuals, leaders in particular, knock knock, how we respond to like people being close or closeness, how we respond to authority and independence, and even emotional needs across our lifespan that we can think about, and then even especially under stress. I think for me, attachment wounds are the emotional imprints left when safety, consistency, and attunement were missing in early relationships. When I think about self concept is the internal, organized sets of beliefs that we believe or that we hold about who we are, including our self worth, our competence, our identity, and the place that we are in the world. It develops over repeated relational. relational experiences and strongly influences how a person interprets feedback, failure, success, and not most importantly, but also belonging. Self concept, just in a nutshell, is the story that we carry about who we are, especially when no one else is affirming you or even watching. So I hope both of those make sense around attachment wounds and self concept, just to help you like dive into the conversation a little bit more, and to ground us rather. So some common attachment patterns, in leadership. I know many of you may already know about the attachment styles, but what comes up for me with leadership is we see anxious attachment that may show up as over functioning. It may show up as people pleasing sometimes, needing validation from those that you lead. A lot of applauses, amens. I see this a lot also in athletes, right? Who really soak in and need that those applauses and cheers. Anxious attachment also shows up as like difficulty with boundaries sometimes. Avoiding attachment may show up as emotional distance, control, for sure. And then even we see sometimes like I'll do it myself leadership. I'll put quotes on it. I'll do it myself leadership. And also, again, discomfort with vulnerability or feedback. And that's a piece that I feel like is many people who may who experience avoid attachment struggle with sometimes. And then disorganized attachment shows up as inconsistency, reactivity, and then power struggles. So I think what's helpful to say here is your leadership style is often your attachment style with the microphone. Your your leadership style is often your attachment style with the microphone. Listen, I don't make the rules. I'm just saying it out loud. So I think it's helpful to walk through those attachment styles in the context of leadership to see and hear how they may show up for us. But I'll keep going to talk more about how unhealed wounds show up in authority roles. So now I'm talking predominantly to men, but sometimes women experience or are in authority roles, and you might think about this as well for yourself. Unhealed wounds often show up as control instead of clarity. Control instead of clarity. So when someone doesn't feel safe internally, they try to manage people and they try to manage outcomes instead of just communicating expectations. Like control becomes a substitute for inner stability. That's good. Also, unhealed wounds often show up as defensiveness instead of discernment. Defensiveness instead of discernment. Like feedback, I don't care if it's said in the right way. Maybe if that can make it better, but feedback feels like it's an attack. It feels like it's an attack, especially when those particular wounds are unhealed, and I think that makes it hard to separate like what's useful from what's triggering you. The nervous system as it should, right? It goes into protection mode before wisdom can even come online to really help you see that this is really just feedback that could be helpful. That's why I love our my faith. It really says like let's seek wise counsel. But oftentimes, if there's an unhealed wound in that particular place, it cannot receive in the way it could receive it. Also, unhealed wounds often show up as reactivity instead of regulation. Unhealed pain, it shortens the distance between feeling and action. Between feeling and action, and which could lead to maybe sharp words, could lead to impulsive decisions, could lead to emotional withdrawal. Like regulation, in my thinking right now, regulation creates space, but reactivity collapses the space. Regulation creates space, receiving, welcoming, and reactivity collapses that space. And also shame instead of accountability. Now I know shame, and I give that so much grace as we work through that. But instead of owning mistakes and repairing harm, shame turns inward or even outward. Sometimes, like blaming, hiding, or shutting down. But accountability, it requires enough self worth for each of us to stay present when things go wrong. So I hope you receive that, and I invite you to keep leaning in and keep listening. And if this is tugging on you, pause it, maybe take a deep breath, and come back whenever you're ready. There's definitely more. I also want to say, when someone has authority, this is clear to me as a leader and even as a therapist, of course. But as a leader, like when someone has authority, like their nervous system sets the tone, right? I could say so much more about that, but this isn't a career fair. But also their unresolved pain, it this is my it can get projected. Like their unresolved pain can get rejected, but also their coping strategies. This is so clear to me, and I wish I had more examples to share. I'm trying to keep my job, amen, but their coping strategies become culture, and ultimately I hope, in reflection, I have some reflection questions for us at the end. But I think it's helpful to see those three things that not only does their nervous system set the tone, their unresolved pain sometimes can get projected, and their coping strategies, the way they cope and show up, that becomes culture, almost like the lay of the land of the organization. So I think it's helpful to hear those. And I think got some hope though. I'm not gonna just leave us on like the unhealed wound parts of us or the unhealed parts of us. I really do believe if I think about I'm the hope dealer on social media at I am Kevin Overton. I call myself the hope dealer. Shout out to you if you're in the Hope Nation on my social media space. So I always want to give and leave hope with this, but you don't have to fully be healed in order to start as a leader or to even be a man, to lead families, to lead different things. Maybe that's the goal, but I still want to empower you just a little bit wherever you are on your map. And I'm just reframing leadership, and this is what comes up for me as we're building this airplane as we're flying it. I love that analogy, but I want to reframe leadership as a practice of a practice of accountability while we're growing. Again, emphasis on the while we're growing, but I'm just saying that this is a practice of accountability while we're growing. That's why I said I'm building the plane as we're flying it. Here's what's required though. We do need self reflection. We do need to build and learn repair skills. Counseling is helpful for that. We do need a willingness to pause instead of just powering through, like most of us tend to do sometimes. And I'm also going to be an advocate for support. Like support is needed. That whether that's therapy, whether that's coaching, I love coaching, whether that's spiritual direction, but also it can look like community and having a community around you. Again, you don't need to be healed. You just have to be honest about where you are, about where you're still healing. So I hope that's helpful. Some questions that I may ask myself if you want just some takeaways, just some reflective questions. And that is, what part of your healing most impacted your leadership? What part of your healing most impacted your leadership? If you like to journal, write things down, I would get a journal now because I'm going to give you 4 questions, 5 questions. That was one of them. But what part of your leadership most impacted, excuse me, what part of your healing most impacted your leadership? Another question I would just ask myself in reflection and meditation and prayer time is, where did you first learn what authority looked like? Men, hello? Where did you first learn what authority looked like? Also, how do you respond internally when someone challenges you? Listen, that one was hard to write about, but I think it was helpful. Again, I'm someone who loves data. How did you respond, or how do you respond internally, not just externally? That's also good data, but internally, what comes up for you? And then, what emotion is hardest for you to tolerate as a leader? That's a good one. And then, how do you repair after you've caused harm, intentionally or not? That's both of those are true or needed. How do you repair after you've caused harm, intentionally or not. Again, I'm all for like pausing the episode. Also, although I want you to keep going, but write those questions down. Go back and watch it to write them down again. But those are especially if you're a leader in your career. Again, men, women, boys, and girls, men in particular, they're just helpful reflection questions for you to just be thinking about, maybe on your ride to work today or on your way home. Maybe do an assessment. Okay, this is my day. Like, how, what came up for me, and maybe some of these questions. But we're now moving to the segment of the episode where we read a letter from our listeners. Now, this is a letter from someone watching the show, and they're navigating mental health, life, and everything in between. And we read a letter right here on the show. So today we have Roderick. He's writing into the show. Roderick says, he says, I'm not a teenager anymore, but I feel like I've never learned how to deal with my emotions. When something comes up, whether that's stress, sadness, or anger, I either shut down or distract myself until it passes. People around me seem to know what they're feeling and how to talk about it, and I honestly don't know where to start. It feels embarrassing to admit that I don't have the language or the tools, especially as a man who's supposed to have it together. I want to grow, but every time I try to look inward, I feel overwhelmed and unsure if I'm doing it right. I don't know if I should be in therapy, journaling, praying, or just toughening it up. I'm afraid that if I open things up, I won't know how to handle what comes out. Where does someone begin when emotional awareness feels this form? So I would just say a few things. First of all, thank you for writing into the show, Roderick. Definitely holding space for you here. You come to the right place. And shout out to you just for having the courage to send that in. I always start with this. This doesn't feel like an intervention or like a homework assignment or like a big astronomical thing, but I want to start with just normalizing like where you are. I would challenge you to say nothing is wrong with you, right? Like many of us men were never taught emotional skills, and so for me this isn't a failure, right? There's just a gap in learning. First of all, I want to pause so I have it on my mind. I want to invite you to read. I think it's called "The Man, the Moment Demands" by Jason Wilson, and he reminds us in that book that oftentimes us as men we don't have many emotional crayons in our crayon book, and that's a good place to start. Just to think about normalizing that that's something that's indwelt in our culture and our learning and skills as we're becoming men in today's society. So I'm normalizing that. Maybe even lower the bar a little bit. I invite you to lower the bar. Like you don't need insight or clarity to begin. I just think that curiosity, like for me, like awareness always becomes or comes before understanding. And I think for me, I guess naming the fear without feeding it. So we can name it without like feeding that particular fear. So it makes sense that you're afraid of opening up. I mean, for sure, no one walks around, I know, these United States with like, okay, I'm ready to open up. But I'll also go beyond to say like emotions do feel dangerous when we have not had guidance or containment to really express our emotions in any way. So I would think I would offer like maybe one or two entry points that come up for me. One, by start by naming or excuse me noticing your body before naming the emotions. Like your body often knows before your mind does. So maybe you're experiencing like a tight chest or a clenched jaw, shallow breathing. Like I said, the body's going to probably know before the mind does. So start by noticing like how your body is feeling in those moments or in any moment. And then maybe secondly, I invite you to use something that I've been using ever since I became a therapist, and that is like the calm feelings wheel. Like that has helped me really see and identify that there's a range of emotions that we have. There's like three levels of emotions, really, if you think about it, and that has helped me begin connecting an emotion that I'm having in my body to like a feeling that's sort of named. And I think in those moments, you can kind of really kind of, take some data points and just kind of navigate it that way. But you can connect that emotion to the moment that you're experiencing to help begin identifying more and more language to add more emotions to your emotional crayon box. So those are two entry points that I would invite you to consider. And then I want to just end on a couple more things, which is let's reframe support a little bit more. Like, one, therapy isn't for broken people. I think it's for people who were never taught how to feel safely. And so, again, I'm just sitting with you in this, in your letter and supporting you. I think that hopefully is received by you. Let me know in the comments for sure. Or if there are other ways you all think in the comments too, let me know. I think I would say this: emotional awareness isn't about becoming someone else. I think it's really just about finally meeting yourself where you are. So that's my main takeaways from that, and I hope that resonates with you all. I think we're going to end it here. Like, that is the hill to the episode today. But I will close on this one thing, which is like, let me just offer us like a grounding takeaway and just three anchors that we should know while healing. Three anchors for healing while leading. They are awareness, regulation, and repair. Awareness, let's know your patterns. Regulation, tend to your nervous system. Men too, you have a nervous system, men. Let's wake up. You have a nervous system. Tend to your nervous system, and then lastly, repair. It's okay to apologize when needed. It's okay to adjust and apologize when needed. It's okay. I promise you, it will not. It won't hurt. That's the way I want to say it today. But I'll end with this comment here. And healing does not make you worthy to lead. Integrity does. So again, a couple of things. This has been the Heal to Lead episode. Again, if you want to write into our show, email us at healtolead@gmail.com, and we may read a letter on the show. Thank you for listening. My healing habit for today is more about what I've been saying this on maybe previous episodes. Take a deep breath. Take a deep breath. Not just a shallow, okay, I'm coming and going, but take a deep breath. Calm your nervous system. You deserve it. Peace out.